Alright, welcome to video 2 of 4 in Java arrays. Last video we discussed the fundamentals of arrays, some information we just needed to sort of memorize and try to appreciate. This video we're going to actually code a little bit, and we're going to do it in Replit because it's easily accessible, and we're going to declare arrays of different types, primitive types such as integer and double perhaps. We'll also do some object types such as string and a little class that we'll create on our own called pupil, which will represent student objects or pupil objects. So if you're new to Replit, you just gotta click on My REPLs right here, and I'm actually going to create a new folder just to kind of keep things organized. So I'm going to call this arrays, and then I'm going to go ahead and open arrays and create a new Replit of Java, and then I will go ahead and give it a name, which I guess can be arrays, and then we'll go ahead and create that. And just like last time, it'll generate some basic hello world type code. All right, and if you're a student of mine, please make sure you invite me to it so that I can look at it and of course grade it in the future. Otherwise, just keep moving on. So right now we've got our main method, and again, if I run it, all it does is output the context hello world. We're going to keep that the same. We're not going to get rid of it, but we will edit the code a little bit. So without further ado, let's go ahead and make sure that this is working and generating the output here. And here we go, and then it says hello world, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to space things out. I'm going to get that class header a little bit away from the main method header there, and I'm going to get some space down here too, just to kind of move things a little bit. Alright, so let's start off with integer arrays. We have to declare what type the array is going to be, which is int for integers, and then we denote that we're actually going to create an array by using the two boxes there. So integer array, and we can call it ages, and we could stop right there, and then we can say that ages equals a new integer array of 5 elements. Okay, so now what we've done in those two lines is the first one on line 7 on my window, we declared that there's going to be an integer array and we will refer to it as ages, but nothing's been created right now. The next line of code, which is on line 9 on my window, we then say ages is going to be a new integer array and it's going to hold 5 elements in it. So now is the point where, without actually changing the code, we wouldn't be able to change the size of the integer throughout the program. This is hard-coded in using this magic number 5. All right, so let's go ahead and refer to one of the instances of the array. So we'll do a system.out.print, and we will say index 0, which is the first index. Remember that even though our array has 5 elements, the first element is known as 0, the second is known as 1, then 2, then 3, then stopping at 4. So we will say we're going to print out index 4 or 0, and we're going to concatenate the actual output of that by saying ages, which is the name of the array, and then the first element, which is index 0. So now we can print it out, and it'll show us what value is in there. Now if I run this, it will say hello world. It will declare and create an integer array, and then it'll print out the message index 0, and then it'll actually print out the literal integer for that, which is 0. Remember, integers, when they're not assigned a value, are automatically assigned the value of 0. So how do we change that? How do we actually give it a value? Well, I can do this manually by saying ages index 0 is now assigned the value of 5. So now if I run that same code, after I assigned the value to that index, we'll see now that the output will be a little bit different by saying 5 at the end. So we could declare integer or any array like this, object arrays or primitive data arrays, and we could kind of, I guess assign all of them. I'll do that real quick. Alright, so the second element, I'll go ahead and I'll make it a value of 3, 4, 6, 9, and then the third element, fourth element, and fifth element of the array. So these are all 5 elements of the array, index 0 through 4, and these are the values that we're going to assign them. So now if I just wanted to, I guess, check all these, I could just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then just change up the number here. So forth and so on. I'm not going to change all these intentionally just to show you, if you're not already aware of that, what's in the string literals doesn't really matter. So we'll go ahead and run it anyhow. And then we will see the output should be 5, 3, 4, 6, 9, just as we assigned them. All right? So that's one way to do integers. Now I'm going to block this out just with a big old block comment here, because I don't want to delete it, but I do want to move on to another data type and another way to do it. So that was one way to do it, which is kind of a long way to do that, and we can make it a little bit shorter. Now I'm going to do a double array, and it doesn't matter. I could do this for an integer or for an object type array as well. So don't think that this is the only way to do doubles and the other way was the only way to do integers. That is not true. So I'm going to create a double array. I'm going to call it height inches, I guess, and then I will say that it's going to be a new double array, and it's going to hold, we'll say 5 values again. Okay, so now if I wanted to, I could find this array's name, which is height in inches, and I will assign it the values. Height inches, we'll do 0, which is the first element, is assigned the value 34. And just like we did previously, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to print out the value of a particular index. So index 0, just got to make sure I refer to the right one. Height inches, and we will go ahead and print out the value. Now keep in mind, as you can see up here, I set it to 34 already, the first index, and I'm going to go ahead and print out the first index. So when I run it, you'll see that the output, hello world, and then index 0 with the number after there is 34.0. And that's because I'm representing a double. Yes, I put in 34, but a double is going to show you, unless you format it, force a format, it will show you the 0.0 at the end. And just like our previous example with the integers, we can continue to assign the different ones here. I'm not going to do all of them, but just to give you an idea, 2, 4, and let's go 1. And then we can just change these numbers. Again, indiscriminately, it doesn't really matter. And then I'm going to take this and print out 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. All 5 elements, and I'll go ahead and change these. Not that it matters, it doesn't change how it executes or anything like that, because it's just a string literal message. But now when I run this, we'll see that our output is hello world, and then index 0 is 34, which makes sense, 34.0. Index 1 is 5.0. Notice how that's not there? That's because right here I said index 1 is 5. And then index 2 is 3.0 because we set index 2. And then index 4 is assigned 4. but you'll notice it prints out index 3 here, as it should. And then exception in thread main, out of bounds exception, index 5 is out of bounds. Well, I made a little error there, and I just wanted to do that to make you see that the difference between an index number and an element number are totally different. Yes, there are 5 elements in here, but the elements start at index 0, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, which is 5 elements. So if I want to do the last element, I have to go ahead and change that to a 4, because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elements in this 5 element array. Now let's go ahead and run it. And you will see we are error free, and each element is printing out the appropriate value of the double with the 0.0. I could have easily done something like 5.45, and if we run it, we'll see that instead of appending a 0 at the end, it'll literally print out the 5.45. So, as you can see right there. Okay? So again, I'm going to block comment this out. And the reason why I block comment it out instead of just delete it is because I might want to refer back to it in the future if I'm trying to learn how to actually create and use arrays. So again, I'm going to do another integer array, and I'm going to call it favnum, so for favorite numbers, and I'm going to use a different way of initializing that, and I'm just going to create 3, 4, 6, 8, 13, and we'll just leave it at that for right now. So this looks a little bit differently. So here's how this works. First, as always, I'm declaring what type of data my array will hold. So this array will hold an integer, series of integers, and I'm going to refer to it by its name, favnum, because I was storing people's favorite numbers, let's say. And then I'm creating this list. You'll notice between the left curly brace and the right curly brace, there's a certain amount of numbers, and then it ends with a semicolon. So essentially, what I've done is I've created another array of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elements. And if I sort of took, I'm just going to steal all this stuff right here, these printlns. If I steal these, and you can type them out if you want to, just pause the video and kind of catch up. I'm going to change all those ages to favnums. So that we're referring to this particular array. So now when I go ahead and run it, you're going to see very similar format, hello world, and then it'll say the indexes, whatever. But the first index holds a 3, so index of 0 holds a 3, prints out a 3. The second element in index 1 holds a 4, and therefore prints out a 4. So forth and so on, as you can see. So those are 3 different ways to declare and initialize arrays. In the next section, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to create an array of object types. So in order to do that, you should have the pupil code that I shared and created. If you're watching the video and you're not part of the Google Classroom, there's a link in the description so that you can access that, and we'll create a new sort of system setup here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to back up out of this particular code right here. Let me back out to the home, or I should have went to my REPLs. So let me click my REPLs here. I'm going to go back into arrays, and I'm going to create another replet inside of arrays, and I will call this obj arrays, and then I'll create it. So the code that you should have access to is the pupil code. So easiest way to get this, if you're on Google Drive, is just to highlight it and then press Control C, or you could right click and copy, and that's of course if you're on a Windows device. But Control-C works pretty well, or Command-C is easiest. And now I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call it capital P pupil.java. Make sure it's a capital P, and then just hit enter. Now that I've copied that code, I can paste it right here. Now if we look just real briefly, you'll see that there is some commenting here, and the class name is pupil. Now, you don't really have to understand all this code at all. I'm not even going to really go over it. Suffice to say, it creates pupil objects, which will restore a first name and a last name for a pupil. So if I pointed at a particular pupil and I said, what's your first name, what's your last name, I should be able to get that information. Okay. So let's take a look at the main method. Again, our main class and our main method are the same as every new Replit we create. So I'm going to go ahead and create some space, as always. I'm going to leave that hello world there just because I want to see it run and expect it to run. So just keep that familiarity for right now. Obviously, we don't really need that line of code. I'm now going to create an array of pupil objects. All right, so we just created a class that creates pupils, and now we can create an array of them. So in order to do that, we have to say what type of array do we want. Well, we want pupils. It's a capital P. And then I want to say that we're going to have an array. And then I'm going to kind of use the last version that we did last time. I'm going to say pupil array, we'll call it second hour, is assigned an array list of new pupil, and we'll call the first one in John Smith, and then we'll delineate that by a comma, and then we will go ahead and create another pupil inside this array, and we will call them Sally, and then comma May, making sure that we're passing strings here. And we'll just stop right there because it's kind of a lot of typing and maybe a little bit of confusion as well. So I told you I wasn't going to talk too much about pupil, and I really don't want to bog you down in the understanding this code. But suffice to say, whenever we create a new object, we must run the constructor of the class that creates those objects. Well, this constructor right here requires a string for a first name and a string for a last name. So every time you see me typing new pupil and then two strings, I'm using this constructor in order to create those. So now we have an array that holds two objects. We could do many more. We could repeat this process. And if you'd like to, I encourage you to go ahead and do that. All you have to do is continue to place a comma and then use the keyword new and then pupil, and then simply in the parameters pass two strings as such, and continue to move on. So like we did previously for the ints and for the doubles, we're going to use some printouts to see if we can actually access these students. So now I'm going to show you something a little bit different as well. So let's stick with index 0 like we did last time. And let's concatenate the output of second hour, which is our array, and let's ask for the first element in there. So now if I do this, you might expect, it to read John Smith or something like that. Let's go ahead and take a look what happens. So as this goes ahead and it starts to compile and run in the Java virtual machine, you'll see that it prints out hello world, index 0, student name is John Smith. So you do have the name of John Smith. Now, if I go ahead and I ask to see the second student, which would be index 1, we'll go ahead and we'll run, and we will see that we get Sally Mae. And then last but not least, just to verify that all of them work, we get J comma B. So you can see that arrays allow you to create a collection of all different types of data. I can do objects such as these pupil objects. I can do string, I can do char, I can do int and double. And anytime I refer to a specific data point inside, or a specific variable inside of an array, I just have to make sure that I know where its index is. And the most important thing about remembering indexes is, again, remembering that the first index is 0 and the last index of an array is however long it is minus 1. So if I have 5 elements in that array, the last index is number 4. Well, hopefully that helps you understand these a little bit more. I would definitely encourage you to practice some things, try different objects, and maybe even, if you're feeling it, to call some methods from some of these objects, although we'll be covering that in a later video. All right, well, good luck.